Okay. So thank you very much. Can I just get a feel for who you guys are? Whether it's academics and librarians, or what background is, and just how many librarians, and academics of one form or another. Yeah. And the remainder? Okay.
We're from Sage Publishers.
All right, okay, hi.
Hello.
Okay, so that's a nice mix, because quite often academics are sometimes reluctant to turn up to things like this sometimes, so it's great to see some. Okay, as you kindly said, we started up out of deep frustration with the legacy publishing world. And on multiple grounds. In our case, we started off in the humanities and the social sciences. I'm an economist. The other founders are a Russian literature and a historian. And really, it was about monographs in the humanities and social sciences, which was our real bugbear. And I won't go through the repeats of all the standard problems that are being faced there, but it was really frustration about the fact that the legacy publishers have no incentive for change and are very, very reluctant to change. And and so it was frustration and set up to try and do things differently, and just at some point you've got to stop grumbling, don't you? You've got to say, if only the world was different, if only something, and you've got to actually do something. And that's the thing that I really want to try and get through. It's actually not that difficult to do things, to change things, to get things going in an open access world. It requires a little bit of an initiative, a little bit of energy, quite a bit of energy probably. So there's a bit of push that's required. But actually, there's a lot of the systems in place. It's not that difficult to start making things happen. And as more people get involved, as more small initiatives happen, it grows into a substantial alternative distribution and dissemination network. So I really push, encourage people, do things. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted either. That's what I wanted. Can I just start very quickly with a couple of definitions, just because I find it useful that we're all on the same page. It's all old hat, and I'm sure you all know it. But when I talk about open access, I'm actually going to have, there are three components to that I want to think about. The first is being free to read online, and that's really critical. That's really important, and that's a huge first step, is that people can actually access material, that we're not constraining our knowledge to the publisher-controlled distribution channels, which are price dependent, and therefore you are pricing the majority of people out of the market. So making it free to read online is a huge first step, but it's only a first step. Being able to free to share it is another important part, that you can share the results, you can share with other people, you're not restricted in your ability to share. And thirdly, and this is I think the really exciting part going forward, is the ability to reuse it, to engage with the research and reuse it and pass it on. And I think those are all three things, and we need to think about this open access debate and the various parts of it on those three sections. So some of the things about Creative Commons, there's a big argument between CC BY, if everybody knows what that is, attribution only. That's really hitting this final one, that's allowing all three of those things. Well, NCND is sort of allowing you to have free to read online and some degree of sharing, but it's not moving very far down that list of possible things that would be deemed open access, I think. The second thing that I'd like to definitions quickly is the difference between green and gold. Just again to clarify a couple of things. By green open access, I'm going to mean that the final copy, or a final copy of the published work, is available under an open access license from a repository somewhere. That might or might not be the typeset final version, but it is the final version, in that all the text is exactly the same, and that the tables and the data are exactly the same tables and data as you would find in the final published version. There's no requirement for an embargo period onto that. Yeah? So it's just that it's on a repository somewhere. The second part is that of gold open access, and by gold open access I'm going to mean the typeset, the final publisher's version. The published version is available under an open access license, and there's no requirement under that for an APC or an author processing charge or an article processing charge or whatever you want to. There's no requirement for a prepayment on that. Yeah, this is about a distribution system, not the business model that supports it. And there's been a lot of concertinaing of the fact that gold necessarily means that researchers pay, and that's not necessarily the case, and predominantly that is not the case. So I just want to highlight those two things. So some quick examples of green open access. The two big ones probably are Archive, which I think you'll probably be talking about later, which is big in physics and maths, computer science, in the sort of the techie areas. And that's a big repository. It's got nearly 1 million articles on there, and that's a huge resource and very widely used. But I'll leave that for the next talk. PubMed Central is big in health and the biomedical sciences. They've got about 3 million articles, and it's become even bigger since the NIH in the US put a requirement that all the research that they fund needs to be placed into PubMed Central. And as far as gold open access, the big example, again, in the sciences is the Public Library of Science. And they're publishing about 33,000 articles a year. So this is one journal, plus one journal is publishing a huge number of articles. And so that's become that has become a game player, a game changer in the whole open access world. Okay. Just quickly, all of those three have got different funding models. Yeah. So PLOS happens to have an APC. That's their funding model. Archive is funded by a collection of university libraries on the whole. So it's based in Cornell, but it's got a whole bunch. It's got a group of libraries that are supporting that. And PubMed Central is sponsored by the US state, so it's a federal funded. So three completely different funding models, and all huge and very, very influential. Okay. For some reason, I just noticed just before I came up, I had some data, but it's not in there. But I'll tell you what it is, just quickly. There's quite a big difference between what is published research between the arts and the sciences, and simplistically, science people like articles and don't like books. And arts people like books and book chapters and aren't particularly into articles. And so there's a big difference there that we need to be thinking about in open access. There's a big difference, therefore, between the arts and the sciences in what is being looked to be delivered. In the journals, and I'm going to spend most of my time thinking about the humanities more than the sciences, figuring that we've got somebody who's going to be spending more time on the sciences than the humanities coming later. But there are thousands and thousands of gold open access journals that exist both in the humanities and the sciences, and the vast majority of them do not charge anything to the author for publication. There is no APC associated. So the dominant or the most prevalent model for gold open access publishing is not an APC model. So the APC models have become important because of the type of hefty mandates that have come down, that have institutionalized them, and they're particularly important for two groups of publishers. It's the legacy publishers who are looking to transfer their existing income streams into open access, and for predatory publishers, people who are also looking for an income stream from authors to generate it. Those are the two groups that APC is important for. It's not generally important for academically disseminated open access work. Okay, so very quickly, some data there. This is from the Directory of Open Access Journals, which is a good resource for finding quite a lot of open access journals. They're quite selective on which journals they will allow. All journals have got to show that they have a rigorous peer review process and they have an editorial board. So there's some pre-selection about these journals. There's about 10,000 of them listed from all around the place. About 2/3 of them make do not have any form of article processing charge. there's a majority of them are in the sciences rather than the social sciences. Within the humanities, looking at a couple of areas, literature and history, we got 600, nearly 700 journals in literature and 200 in history listed on that. 94% of them do not make any charges at APCs. So the vast majority of these have got alternative funding models. In this case, in the history case, I had a very quick look to try and identify where it was, and half of them are published by a university. So it's coming out of a university faculty or department. About 20% come from research institutes, and I've included museums in that, and about 15% are coming out from academic societies of one form or another. Yeah. The number listed on here that are coming out from the legacy publishers, university publishers are not included in universities. So the proportion, what have we got there? 50, 70, 85. Yeah, there was about 8-10% I couldn't identify. So it leaves about 5-6% that's being provided by the legacy publishing route, which is the traditional commercial publishers and the university presses. Okay, so lots of business models are out there. The first is that the APC model is a fairly small model, not a very common one. Most of them rely on academic input. You know, that's no different. All journals, all publishers rely on academic input. Not much different there. But in a lot of cases, it is looking at academics like ourselves who have put in time to try and set things up. Most of them have some form of university or institutional support, and I don't think we don't want to run away from that. I think it is really, really, really important to recognise that universities and research institutions have a really important role to play in providing the infrastructure that allows initiatives to develop and new ideas to bubble through. So that's really critical. And there's sometimes a reluctance. People say, well, you can't have, that's not a business model. I just point out the entire internet was developed precisely that way. And we've been able to generate some business models subsequently. So, it's not something to back away from. There's a real responsibility that we can take that on. The other thing that's critically important is open infrastructure. And one of the things that has really made the journals work are things like open journal systems, which provide a very, very easy open source program and facility to run an online open access journal. Any journal doesn't have to be open access, but you can download that software with all its documentation, and it probably only takes a day to work out how to have an entire journal up and operating. And that type of resource really it just changes things, because now anybody can set up and run a journal. And that's what facilitates an awful lot of the activities I think we see in journals. We also have things like the Directory of Open Access Journals and Open Edition and places like that, which provide, it's about joining dots. If you want to start, you don't want to reinvent every wheel. If you can bring in the wheels that have been invented anywhere else, it makes it a whole lot easier. And that's what generates opportunity for open access. Okay, so just quickly skimming through some of the things about the humanities, though, is that some of the real big examples that exist in the sciences don't exist in the humanities. We don't have any equivalents of PLOS. We don't have any equivalents of arXiv. We don't have any equivalents of PubMed Central. I point out there's another journal that has set up quite recently, again in the sciences. It's called PeerJ, and I just mention it because it's an interesting one, because it's a membership model. You join as a member, and then as a member you have rights in being able to publish a certain number of papers during a year, and you have some responsibilities. You're expected to do some peer reviewing. It's just an interesting model, because there's all sorts of arguments about academic societies that they say, academic societies we need to whip into shape as well. On the whole, they say, oh no, we've got to have our money that comes through from protecting access to knowledge. But this is a potential way, something that they could be thinking about how they can fund this, is through this type of membership model that we're seeing being played with there. Okay, and in the humanities, we've got the Open Library of the Humanities starting up soon, hopefully, which is an initiative, again, of academics to try and get a PLOS equivalent in within books. The first thing to say is that the books are different, and in the humanities and social sciences, the model of a monograph publication, the business model for that has been dead for much longer than open access has been an issue. The model on the whole for monograph publishing is that you get 200 or 300 of these books that get bound. They get bought at about 70 quid by libraries. They get put up on the shelf, and that's the end of it. The monograph, the publishers aren't making what they call, they're not making sufficient money to say that this is worthwhile. They're spending all their time saying we have to target America, because those are the only libraries that are buying our books, and so we have adjustments of research to try and come up with this. It's a dead model. It's dead, nothing to do with open access. It was dead beforehand. Everybody's pulling their hair out saying, how do we make monographs work, before open access came along. So open access is not a challenge to humanities publishing and long-form publishing. It's the real opportunity. That's the future. That's, if we can get that working, we've got a way of keeping long-form dissemination working. So we just need to be thinking positively about that, rather than, it's going to, I'm not going to get dust up my nose when I read things anymore. Okay. Lots of opportunities, broader readership, reader interaction, multimedia publications. What you can do with an open access digital work is far, far broader and more exciting and more stimulating and more opportunity than one can do with a printed work. That's not to say that printed work doesn't have a role, but it's just not the only role. You can do so much more in some other with other areas. Okay, but the world in books is not looking as good as the world in journals. There's Open Access Books here. The director of Open Access Books has only got 1,600 books listed. That's, they had 10,000 journals listed. So that means there's like an order of magnitude difference in the number of open access books to open access journals. So there's something else that's holding up the monograph, the ability to have the dynamism that we're seeing in journals. The other thing to just point out, in journals, there's a huge number of journals. The country with the most number of journals on the open access, director of open access journals is Brazil. That beats the US. So there's a huge movement of generation of academic activity in South America, in Spanish and in Portuguese. In books, here are the two main sort of sources. There are no books in Portuguese, not a single one. And in Spanish, I found two. Oh no, there were more over here. But it's just a completely different world. That dynamism that we're seeing as far as open access journals is happening is not happening in open access books. And I think one of the reasons is because we don't have the systems in place, such as the open journal systems, that make it easy, A, to create the book, but B, to disseminate the book and get it out there in the digital format as is happening in the journals. So that's where we need to be working, is getting that platform that allows easy creation and dissemination of the work, and muscling that away from the legacy publishers. Okay, I realise I've got about 5 minutes or something like that. Have I? Yeah.
We'll probably give you a couple more.
Okay. So just quickly, this is us and this is what we do. So we're open book publishers. We've published about, I think it's about 41 books now, all in the humanities and social sciences, and all research-oriented monographs and collected works. This is a sort of typical homepage for us. We have a very rigorous peer review process. We're only interested in works that would be published, that would meet the academic standard of the best university presses. So, and we make that very clear to our referees. And we've been very lucky to attract some great authors. We got Amartya Sen. Surprise, surprise, I took a picture of the one that had Amartya Sen on it. But we got Amartya Sen, but we've also got people like Caroline Humphrey, if you're in social anthropology, and Lionel Gossman, if you're into sort of European history, and from all around the world. So, Senna's at Harvard, Gosman's at Princeton, Caroline Humphrey is at Cambridge, and we've also got works like Yeats' Annual, which is associated with the Institute of English Studies, where they moved from Palgrave to come over to an open access, to make their works open access that couldn't be delivered properly by the legacy publishing world. So that's who we are. That's the sort of thing that we have. We have what we do is we have paperback, hardback, which we're retailing. All the books are free to read online, and you can get the HTML there as well. So they're all free, accessible, copyable, paste, etc. Online. They're under a range of CC licenses, which is up to the author. So we encourage CC BY. We can talk about some of the complications, not always possible. And I was talking at a lunch earlier. Images are real problematic for CC BY, and so some of the copyright pages read a little bit like introductions. Here's a copyright introduction to the book, which is all the text is CC BY, and this image is public domain, and this image is all rights reserved, and this image is blah, 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 blah. And so our business model is that we support that by selling paperback editions. We also sell the formatted digital editions. So in most cases, we sell the PDF, we sell the EPUB, and we sell the Mobi. If you click down there, you'd see our digital editions. So there's free-to-read versions online. HTML is free online, but the formatted versions, that's where we get the predominant. That's our primary revenue source. Okay, oh dear. Okay, none of these things have come through. Okay, online readers, that would have shown a map of the world, which would have had about 133 countries that access our work. About 25% of those would be from the US, 20% of those would be from the UK. No surprise there. We do academic work in English. What is surprising is that adds up to only 45%. And I think most legacy publishers would say that their readership is dominated by those two countries, be much more than 45%. And then it's from the rest of the world. So in fact, during this period, the third largest country was Algeria. Don't know why. It isn't usually our third largest, but over this period, Algeria was our third largest country. And they had 6% of our readers came from Algeria. So you can see that there's this big jump. We've got those two, but then there's this huge, broad readership amongst 133 other countries of people coming through and reading our works. Oh, that's where it went. There we go. Is that roughly what I said? Okay. You can see that. So all the countries are blue. We got readers from, and so there's some that are missing. Yeah, North Korea. Yeah, we got a little bit in the middle of Africa. Greenland. I just wish we could get it's such a big area of the map, isn't it? It'd be great to get a Greenland reader. But I mean, it's pretty extensive, isn't it? So that's where our readers are coming from. And that's because of the online ability, isn't it? I mean, our paper distribution to Algeria is quite poor, I must say. It's something that we need to work on. Okay, reader interaction, we've got a bunch of books. There's other books out there as well, which, because they're open access, allow interaction between the readers, development of the book at various stages by readers. So there's some examples here of our book, which is, because it's open access, it's been picked up by the Classics Library, which is a website for classicists, primarily teachers, and they're using the book as a discussion. There's comments that come in at the paragraph by paragraph level. Kathleen Fitzpatrick, fantastic book, and here also in history they've got a good description of how they developed the book because of open access. Key point: all of them use WordPress plugins. Yeah, it's really easy. You just plug in an existing WordPress, and it brings up what's a publication here, because we started with a blog tool. And we've come out with something that's going to be a publication here. And it's the existence of that software that makes this really easy to do. Just what do you want to do rather than how you do it. Okay, multimedia publications we can put in. Here's something from storytelling in northern Zambia. It's pretty much what it says on the cover, actually. And there's stories in it, and they're told by people. And there's the picture, there's the transcript of the story, and there's the QR link that goes through to the video, which is on YouTube. So that you can read the book and scan on your mobile and see the video of the story being told. There it is. You can also find the story on YouTube, and because you find the story on YouTube, that leads you through to the book. That's an audience not usually addressed in academic work. We've also got to just give a shout out here for a wonderful program that we've started. We've got two of our authors working with this product. It's by Scalar. Again, it's an open source free program that allows you to bring in multimedia content, to change the formatting that readers can go through the work so that they don't have to have it presented in the way that I've decided as the author or the publisher. There's multiple routes that you can work through the work. It's a fantastic tool for really freeing up what you can do with research output. Bunch of alternative funding models which we've sort of discussed. There's a bunch of maybe one just to quickly throw in here. Another area to think about is how libraries can work collectively to deliver. To support the creation of an alternative publishing framework for open access. And some of the library collectives are opening up. I mentioned the Open Library of Humanities. Open Editions is another one in the French crowd. Again, it's about thinking, can the libraries coordinate to think about how they support open access? Knowledge Unlatched is a recent one, which I can go into. Unglue It, I throw in there as well, is a crowdsourcing. So we've had 2 books crowdsourced. We got the funding to publish them by crowdsourcing and Unglue It. And so this is where people just put in money and say, yeah, I like that book, I want to make it open access, here's £5. And you get enough of those to do it, you get enough to do the book. And so we got 2 books done like that. The other thing is that along the way, we got a tweet to support this by, there's a band called Weezer. Don't know if you guys have heard of Weezer? Yeah. And so they're a big band over in the US, especially in the south of US, but they've got a whole lot of Harvard grads. And one of them quite liked this book. So he tweets to his 2.5 million followers, why don't you support the crowdsource? That is, again, an audience that we hadn't normally be tapped into with an academic publication. Okay, so just to finish up, what have we got? There's a bunch of steps that we need to get open access working. It's not just about getting the text into published work. In fact, that's not so difficult now. There's lots of ways that one can do that. The next step is to get the published work to the reader. That's where open access really needs to be thinking about. Because getting the work from the published work to the reader is really, really, really important. And at present, the system for the delivery is provided by the legacy publishers. And so if we want to have an alternative system, we have to come up with an alternative delivery system that cannot be ring-fenced and used to take profit margins from. And then reuse. And once again, we need to think about the platforms for the reuse of the works, rather than having reuse within the walled fences of the legacy publishing model. I can talk about more than that later if it needs to be. Okay, thank you.